I will never forget that night. The lawyer's office was lit by a harsh fluorescent glow, casting long shadows across the polished wooden table. The smell of my mother's medicine still lingered on the old handbag I had carried with me, like a ghost of the years I had spent at her side. 10 years of mornings making her tea, nights rubbing her back through coughing fits, and countless hospital runs in the pouring rain. All of it sat heavy on my chest as I waited for the words that would change everything. The lawyer lifted a thick folder, his voice steady, mechanical, like the ticking of a clock echoing in the silence. In her final will, Mrs. Carter leaves the house and all assets to her eldest daughter, Susan. The words sliced through the room like a blade. I froze. Susan lowered her eyes to the table, refusing to meet my gaze. My brother cleared his throat, but the corner of his mouth twitched, as if he was fighting back a smile. My name wasn't mentioned, not once, not a single keepsake, not even a sentimental token. 10 years of devotion, gone, erased, as if I had never existed. A few weeks before she passed, my mother had held my hand and whispered something strange. "You'll understand. Later." At the time, I thought she was delirious. But now, with the will being read out loud, those words cut deeper than ever. The question thundered in my mind. Why? Why would I? The youngest daughter who gave up her career, my youth, and everything else to care for her, be left with nothing. The light above flickered. My heart pounded, each beat louder than the last. In my head I saw the same hands that had once fed her soup and held her through the pain, now empty, trembling with nothing left to hold on to. That night, I didn't just lose an inheritance, I lost the belief that love, sacrifice, and loyalty would be recognised in the end. And I didn't know if I wanted to dig for the truth or bury it forever with her. But then, my eyes caught a glimpse of a golden envelope tucked between the papers, something the lawyer hadn't mentioned yet. And in that instant, I knew. There was more to this story than anyone wanted to admit. Before that night, my life had already been defined by my mother's decline. Our home in the suburbs looked ordinary from the outside. White siding, a small front porch, a yard where the grass always grew too quickly, but inside, every corner carried the weight of her illness. The sound of the oxygen machine humming in the living room became the soundtrack of my 20s. The scent of menthol ointment clung to the couch cushions. I was the youngest of 3, the one who stayed. My older sister Susan had her career in finance, a busy office in the city, and a polished image she wore like armour. My brother, Mark, lived a more careless life, bouncing between jobs, always with an excuse for why he couldn't be around. And then there was me, the one who gave up graduate school when Mum's health slipped. I told myself it was temporary, that I would go back when she got better, but temporary, stretched into a decade, until caring for her became my whole world. Sometimes Susan would stop by with her sharp suits and expensive perfume. She'd kiss Mom on the cheek, ask a few polite questions, then retreat to whispered phone calls in the kitchen. I once saw her slipping papers back into Mom's drawer. Documents I didn't ask about because I didn't want to start another argument. That was my first mistake, complicity by silence. Mark, on the other hand, would breeze in on holidays, dropping off store-bought casseroles and disappearing before the dishes were even cleared. He liked to joke, "Your Mum's favourite, you'll get the house one day." His smirk carried both dismissal and envy. But I wasn't thinking about inheritances back then. My flaw was simpler. I believed love and sacrifice guaranteed recognition. I believed that if I poured myself into caring for her, it would all balance out. One afternoon, while I was helping Mum sit up in bed, my niece, Susan's daughter, wandered in holding a stuffed rabbit. She looked at me with big, innocent eyes and asked, "Who's going to take care of Grandma when you go back to school?" I smiled, but my chest tightened. The truth was, I didn't know if I would ever go back. My life had narrowed to pill schedules, doctor's appointments, and quiet evenings where I watched Mum's chest rise and fall, praying for one more day. I ignored the signs, the closed-door conversations, the paperwork shuffled away, the way Susan's voice lowered whenever she spoke with Mom about arrangements. I told myself it was nothing, that Mom would never leave me out. But deep down, I think I already sensed it. And that unspoken knowledge, that fear I refused to name, became the shadow in every room of that house. The first crack appeared in small, almost invisible ways. One evening, as I was washing dishes, I heard Susan's voice from the living room. She was speaking in that clipped, professional tone she used when she wanted control. Through the thin wall, I caught fragments. Final draft. Better for everyone. Timing matters. When I stepped out, she snapped her phone shut and smiled too quickly. Just work stuff, she said, slipping her bag onto her shoulder. You always imagine the worst, you know? Her words stung. I wanted to believe her, but something didn't sit right. A week later, I saw her again, this time sitting with the family lawyer in a corner booth at the diner near Mum's house. They didn't notice me at first. I froze by the door, watching them lean close over a folder. When the waitress brushed past me, I hurried out before they saw. That night, lying awake on the pull-out couch beside Mum's bedroom, I couldn't shake the image. My heart pounded as if I had stumbled into a crime, though all I had seen was paper and whispers. I tried to tell myself I was paranoid, but the doubt gnawed at me. Then came Mark, barging into the kitchen one Saturday with his usual swagger. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You look tired, he smirked. Better hope Mum remembers who's been here for her. Susan says wills can be flexible. I glared at him. What's that supposed to mean? He shrugged, grinning. Just saying, don't take everything for granted. My stomach knotted. Was he taunting me or warning me? A few days later, I made a mistake. While Mum was napping, I opened the drawer where Susan had once hidden those papers. My hands trembled as I sifted through the folders, medical records, bills, and then a thin envelope stamped with the law firm's seal. Inside was a partial draft of a will. Mum's name at the top, but the signature line at the bottom was blank. I shoved it back quickly, but not quickly enough. The drawer squeaked shut, and when I turned around, Susan was standing in the doorway. What are you doing in here? Her eyes narrowed, voice calm but sharp. I was just organising, I stammered. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You've always been too suspicious. Mum trusted me with the paperwork. You should trust me too. But her tone wasn't reassurance. It was warning. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The doubt that once whispered was now screaming. Something was being hidden, and if I didn't dig deeper, I would be left in the dark forever. Proof never arrives all at once. It comes in fragments, pieces that don't fit until suddenly they do. The first piece came from Mrs. Ellis, the neighbour across the street. She had been dropping off soup for Mom for years, always keeping an eye on our family. One afternoon she stopped me on the porch, her voice low. I saw Susan meeting with that lawyer of your mother's, she whispered. Not once, but 3 times, always in secret. My chest tightened. I nodded, thanking her, but the words burned in my mind. The second piece I found myself. Digging again through Mom's drawer late one night, I pulled out an old manila folder buried under medical bills. Inside was a photocopy of an earlier will. My name was right there, a share of the house, personal keepsakes, even Mom's quilt she had promised would be mine. My hands shook as I held it. But it wasn't enough to accuse anyone. I needed more. The third piece arrived by accident. I slipped the old will into my purse and, in my haste, dropped a page on the floor. Mark found it before I did. "What's this?" he asked, waving the sheet with a sly grin. His voice rose loud enough for Susan to hear from the next room. My stomach dropped. "It's nothing, just old paperwork." But it wasn't nothing. And Susan's eyes as she entered the room told me she knew I was onto her. From that moment, the game changed. I took the earlier will to a notary friend I barely kept in touch with from high school. He glanced at the signatures, frowning. "This one looks authentic. The handwriting pressure is consistent. The one I've seen from last month. Different stroke weight, almost like someone guided her hand." I felt a surge of both hope and guilt. Hope that I wasn't imagining things. Guilt that I was doubting my mother's last words. And then came the reversal. As I stared at the old will, I remembered the night Mum whispered, "You'll understand later." My throat tightened. What if the changes weren't manipulation? What if she had her reasons? Maybe she wanted to protect me from family conflict, to spare me from being chained to this house. But that possibility only made the truth more urgent. If Mum truly changed her will of her own free will, I needed to accept it. If she didn't, I needed to fight. Either way, the proof was no longer buried, and there was no going back. The truth didn't come to me in a courtroom or from a lawyer. It came in the quietest of places, inside my mother's old nightstand. I had been searching for medication receipts when I found it. A small, leather-bound journal I hadn't seen before. Its cover was worn, the pages soft with years of handling. I hesitated before opening it, half afraid of what I might find. Her handwriting filled every line. Notes about doctor's visits, daily aches, and sometimes prayers scrawled in uneven ink. But one entry stopped me cold. "Susan insisted I make changes today. She says it will protect Emily. My youngest doesn't see it now, but one day she will understand." My breath caught. Protect me? From what? Another page. "Emily has given me her whole life. I don't want her to feel tied to this house forever. Susan can manage it, but Emily deserves freedom." I sat on the edge of the bed, the journal trembling in my hands. For 10 years, I thought my sacrifice was proof of love, of loyalty, but Mum saw it differently. To her, it was a chain, one she wanted to break, even if it meant cutting me out of her will. The floor shifted beneath me. Everything I believed, that Susan manipulated her, that Mum betrayed me, cracked open. Maybe it wasn't betrayal at all. Maybe it was her way of loving me, twisted and unrecognisable. Tears blurred the words on the page. I wanted to be angry, to cling to the old will as proof that I had been wronged. But in those lines, I saw something else. A mother's desperate attempt to protect her daughter in the only way she knew how. And yet, the question deepened. If Mum truly wanted to free me, why keep it a secret? Why let Susan carry the weight of control? Why leave me in the dark to suffer humiliation in that lawyer's office? For the first time, I realised the story wasn't as simple as Susan's greed versus my sacrifice. The will wasn't just a legal document. It was a battlefield of intentions, love, control, fear, and unspoken promises. And standing in the middle of it, I didn't know anymore who the enemy was. After reading Mum's journal, the world tilted. Nothing was solid anymore. I thought Susan was the villain, manipulating Mum for her own gain. But now, I wasn't sure. Maybe Mum had chosen this path. Maybe she had entrusted Susan with the burden. Still, the secrecy left a bitter taste. I couldn't keep it to myself. I called my best friend, Karen, someone who had stood by me since high school. Over coffee at a quiet cafe, I slid the journal across the table. She read in silence, her brow furrowing deeper with every line. "Emily," she finally said, her voice low, "this doesn't mean you were wrong to be suspicious. It only means your mother's intentions were complicated. But you need to protect yourself. Get a lawyer." Her words cut through my fog. For years, I had been fighting in silence, shouldering everything alone. Maybe it was time I had someone fight for me. Meanwhile, whispers began circulating in the neighbourhood. Mrs. Ellis mentioned she overheard Susan arguing with Mark in the driveway one night. Words like split, "oh," and "not enough" drifted through the air. It wasn't just about honouring Mum's wishes. Money was in play, debts I hadn't known about. The family tension thickened. One evening at dinner, Mark slammed his glass down, his face flushed. "Susan thinks she can handle everything," he sneered. "But she's not the only one Mum trusted." Susan shot him a warning glance. "This isn't the time, Mark." I sat in silence, my fork hovering over my plate, the words from Mum's journal echoing in my head. "Susan can manage it, but Emily deserves freedom." Was this really about protecting me or about controlling me? Karen pressed me again a week later. She handed me the card of an attorney she knew. "You don't have to start a war," she said, "but you need to understand what's legally yours." For the first time, I felt a flicker of strength, but just as quickly, Susan cornered me in the hallway one night. "I know what you've been digging into," she hissed, her eyes sharp. "Don't make this harder than it already is. Mum did what she thought was best." Her tone wasn't cruel, it was weary, but behind it, there was something darker. Fear. I started to realise that the story was no longer just between me and Susan. It was spreading, touching everyone. My friend, my neighbours, even the community gossip mill. People whispered about the Carters' family drama at church, at the grocery store. What had been private was now public. And then came the false resolution. Mark proposed a family meeting, claiming we should settle things peacefully before lawyers got involved. For a moment, I felt hope. Maybe we could talk it out. Maybe I wouldn't have to tear my family apart. But when we sat around the kitchen table, the meeting dissolved into shouting. Mark accused Susan of greed. Susan accused him of freeloading. I tried to explain Mum's journal, but no one listened. By the end, Susan stood up, her face pale but determined. "Mum trusted me," she said, "and whether you like it or not, the will stands." She left the room without another word. Mark cursed under his breath, storming out after her, and I sat there, staring at the empty chairs, realising something crucial. This wasn't going to resolve quietly. The web had widened too far. What started as a family matter was about to spiral into something much larger, legal, social, and deeply personal. The confrontation was inevitable. A week after the failed family meeting, the lawyer summoned us all to his downtown office. The city skyline gleamed through tall windows, but inside the conference room, the air was heavy, as if the walls themselves knew a storm was about to break. I sat across from Susan and Mark. My hands clutched Mum's journal in my lap, the leather worn smooth from days of rereading. The lawyer spread 2 documents across the polished oak table, the earlier will and the revised one. "This is where we stand," he said, his voice even. "There are questions about validity, but ultimately the court will decide if the later version reflects Mrs. Carter's true intentions." Silence fell. I broke it first. "Mum promised me the quilt," I said softly, my voice trembling but clear. "She told me it was mine, and now I'm erased, like I never existed. How is that her true intention?" Susan's lips parted, but no words came. She stared at the table, tapping her nails against the wood, each click echoing like a hammer. Finally, she looked up. "Mum wanted to free you, Emily," she said, her voice raw. "She told me you'd given up too much already. She wanted you to have your life back, not be chained to this house forever." "By cutting me out?" I shot back. My voice cracked. "By humiliating me in front of everyone." Susan flinched, her eyes darting to the lawyer, then to Mark. Mark leaned forward, seizing the moment. "So, you admit you pressured her?" he sneered. "You manipulated Mom into changing it." "I did not." Susan's voice rose unsteady. "You think it was easy for me? You think I wanted this responsibility?" She turned back to me, her face flushed. "I was drowning in debt, Emily. Credit cards, the mortgage, everything. I begged Mom to let me handle the house so you wouldn't have to. She thought she was protecting you and helping me survive." Her words rattled me. This wasn't the villain I'd painted in my mind. It was my sister, desperate, exhausted, barely holding her world together. "But you lied to me," I whispered. Susan's eyes filled with tears. "Because I knew you'd fight me, and I couldn't bear to see you chained here for another decade. Don't you see? I wasn't trying to take from you. I was trying to save you." The room spun. My heart pounded. I wanted to scream, to weep, to walk out and never look back. But the lawyer's voice cut through the chaos. "Regardless of motive," he said firmly, "the will must stand on its legal merits. The court will require testimony, perhaps handwriting experts. Until then, nothing is final." I pulled the journal from my lap and placed it on the table. The leather smacked softly against the wood. "This," I said, "is her voice. Not just signatures on a page. This is proof of what she thought, what she feared, what she hoped for me." Susan's breath hitched. She reached toward the journal, but I covered it with my hand. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This time, I'm not silent." Mark shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "You both just want the spotlight." But even his bravado faltered when the lawyer raised a hand. "This journal complicates matters. It doesn't replace a will, but it could influence interpretation. You need to be prepared for a long, painful fight if this goes to court." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the hum of the air conditioner and the faint city traffic outside. Finally, Susan whispered, "I never meant to hurt you." Her voice cracked, breaking through the silence like glass shattering. In that moment, I saw not a rival, but a sister weighed down by choices too heavy for her shoulders. But it didn't erase the wound in my chest. The years of sacrifice dismissed with a stroke of ink. The climax wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about the collision of love, resentment, and survival. And as I sat there, staring at the proof spread across the table, I realised there would be no clean victory here, only scars. The weeks after that meeting blurred into paperwork, phone calls, and tension that clung to every breath. What had once been whispered suspicions became official. Hearings, statements, legal procedures that pulled our private grief into the cold light of public record. The first hearing was brief. The judge ordered handwriting analysis and set a schedule for mediation. I sat at the long wooden bench, clutching Mom's journal, as the courtroom filled with hushed voices and the shuffle of papers. Susan sat across from me, shoulders rigid, her lawyer whispering into her ear. Mark leaned against the back wall, pretending to be uninterested, but his eyes never left the documents on the judge's desk. When the judge adjourned, reporters waiting in the hallway murmured about family disputes over inheritance. My cheeks burned. What had started in my mother's quiet living room was now gossip for strangers. Back at home, the fallout deepened. My niece stopped visiting as often, sensing the tension between her mother and me. Neighbours offered sympathetic glances at the grocery store, their curiosity barely masked. Even at church, whispers followed me down the pews. Karen, ever loyal, sat with me at the kitchen table late one night. She tapped the attorney's card she had given me weeks earlier. "Emily, you need to keep pushing," she urged. "This isn't just about money, it's about truth, about whether your sacrifice is recognised or erased." I nodded. but exhaustion pressed heavy on my chest. 10 years of caregiving had drained me. Now the fight was draining what little remained. Mediation day arrived. We gathered in a sterile conference room, each of us with our attorneys. Susan looked pale, her hair pulled back tightly, her jaw clenched. Mark sprawled in his chair, cracking jokes until the mediator gave him a sharp look. The discussions went in circles. My lawyer presented the earlier will, the journal, and the neighbour's testimony. Susan's side argued that Mom's last signed document carried the most weight. Mark, unsurprisingly, shifted his stance depending on who seemed to offer him more. At one point, Susan broke. Her voice cracked as she admitted, "I didn't want this responsibility. I begged Mum to leave me the house so I could manage the mortgage, the debts. I thought I was helping." The mediator paused, letting her words sink in. For the first time, I felt a strange mix of pity and anger. Pity for her burdens, anger for the secrecy that cost me my dignity. In the end, no single party walked away victorious. The mediator drafted a compromise. The house would be sold, proceeds divided according to the earlier will's proportions. Some personal items, the quilt, the jewellery box, the family photo albums, were formally assigned to me. Susan kept a larger share of liquid assets to cover her debts. Mark received less than he expected, his smirk fading as the reality sank in. When the agreement was read aloud, the room felt hollow. It wasn't triumph. It was survival. Outside, Susan lingered. For the first time in months, her eyes softened. "Mum loved you," she whispered. "She thought she was saving you. I thought I was too." I clutched the quilt, folded in my arms, tears stinging my eyes. "Then why does it feel like I lost everything anyway?" She didn't answer. And maybe there was no answer. The house stood empty the day the "for sale" sign went up. I walked through each room one last time, the walls echoing with memories, Mom humming softly in the kitchen, the oxygen machine's steady hum in the living room, the creak of the stairs at midnight. For 10 years, this house had been my entire world. Now it was just a shell, waiting for strangers. I sat on the edge of Mom's old bed, the quilt folded neatly across my lap. I traced the stitches she had made years ago, each thread a reminder of her hands, hands I had held during her worst nights, hands that had once held mine. Grief washed over me, but so did something else. Relief. For the first time in a decade, I didn't have to measure my days by pill bottles and doctor's visits. I could breathe. I could imagine a life that wasn't defined by caretaking. Susan stopped by as movers carried boxes outside. She didn't step far into the room, just leaned against the doorframe, her eyes tired. "I know you hate me," she said quietly. "I don't," I answered, surprising myself. "I just don't understand." She nodded, her gaze drifting to the quilt. "Mum thought she was saving you. Maybe I did too, but I see now how much it cost you." Her words hung in the air, fragile, almost an apology. Then she turned and left without another word. That night, I placed Mom's journal and the quilt into a single box, the only pieces of her I truly needed. I carried it into my small apartment across town, a place I had barely lived in for years, and set it on the table. For the first time, I felt the stirrings of possibility. I could go back to school. I could travel. I could build something of my own. The wound was still raw, but freedom pulsed underneath it, like new skin forming over an old scar. As I turned off the light, I whispered into the quiet, "I'll try, Mum. I'll try to live." And I wondered, if you were in my shoes, would you have fought the will, or would you have let it go?